All right, folks. Well, thank you. And today we'll be doing our staging officer workshop. This course was originally designed as a 2-day program. It was very long and tedious. We've actually knocked it down to a couple hours here, and this is the first time I'm delivering this in this format. So definitely looking for any feedback you might have on this. So, with staging, we have to think about what is staging, and we'll talk about all that. We'll get into the forms that you use. We'll talk about level 1 and level 2 staging. And really what staging helps us do is it helps us gain control of a scene if we do it well. Basically, it helps us to also we need to recognize early what our resource requirements are going to be. And we need to be able to call on those resources and get them up to our incident scene as soon as possible, and have them. And sometimes having them waiting on standby is the best idea. Then we can call that resource up as we need it. So staging is basically the process of holding your uncommitted resources in a location away from the incident until they receive specific assignments. This is a very simple definition of staging. If we don't have a formal staging plan, the incident commander can quickly become overwhelmed on larger scenes. With all the resources coming at them at the command post, being able to manage that is very important. So to be effective, there needs to be a standard method of managing a staging area. So I don't know if you guys have had this discussion yet, but if it's always good to talk about and maybe even look into who would you be identifying as a staging officer. Those of you who are going to be incident commanders maybe have those kind of ideas in your head, but they do need to be trained, and they do need to know what they're doing to be able to do this job effectively. So the objective of staging is to maintain coordination, control, and accountability of resources. So as anybody, I don't know if anybody's ever been to a chaotic incident and wondered, why it became so chaotic. One of the reasons that it might happen is because staging was not established, right? So basically, in IFSA, in your Essential 6 textbook, there is a definition in there, and I'm going to read that full definition out to you right now. And so staging is an area or areas where personnel and equipment are awaiting assignment to the incident, and they're held to keep responding equipment out of the way and safe until it's assigned, minimizing confusion and freelancing on the fire scene. It's typically located in a spot in the cold zone where evacuated people cannot interfere with the ongoing operations. So the objective of our staging procedures is going to be so that we can have a standard system of initial placement of our resources. Right? If you see here on this on the picture on your screen, the resources are all of the same type in this photo. They're all parked the same way. They're backed in. They're ready to be deployed, and they're ready if it gets called up by the incident commander and a resource is needed. They can get there at a moment's notice. Right? So if we have many vehicles, you're going to need to have some kind of way of organizing those vehicles as they're coming in. So again, some of the benefits of staging, basically it reduces the congestion. You have a resource pool that you can draw from. It provides for safety and accountability. We'll talk about how that happens, and your staging officer actually has to take care of accountability as well at the staging area. Prevents us from freelancing, going off and doing whatever we want, whatever we think we should be doing, because as we know, we don't freelance in the fire service. We always we only do what we're told once we're told to do it. And basically it helps give command a little bit of time with their incident action plan, the ability to draw up an incident action plan and start implementing that action plan on the scene that you're dealing with. So the effective utilization of staging procedures is going to help prevent unassigned apparatus and personnel from creating confusion and congestion, right? And really does help us to evaluate the conditions prior to us assigning those resources and committing those resources to the fire scene. So when we talk about staging, there are 2 levels of staging, right? Level 1, and level 1 is an informal and automatic, basically level of staging. And this is the one that you'll see most of the time when we're on scene. The level 1 staging is driving up, and they're the ones who are directly at the incident scene, Typically, it'll be a pumper that's in service, that's being used as a pumper, pumping water to an attack line for the firefighters to battle a fire. So anytime, so level 1 staging, again, that is right at the scene. Level 2 is a much more formal system of staging, and that is typically, that's going to be located away from the incident scene, but close by and ready to respond at a moment's notice. All right. So when we're looking at vehicles that are responding to a fire call, we have basically 4 levels that we can talk about. The first would be in transit, and what that would mean is the vehicle is en route to the call. Once they arrive at the call, they either can be listed as one of 3 things, which would be assigned, meaning they have a task, they have a job, they're doing that job. They could be available, and this is related to staging, right? So if they're available, it means that they're not yet assigned, and they are somewhere waiting in a staging area to be assigned a task. And the last one would be, of course, out of service. And this does happen to us occasionally on scenes. I've been at scenes where the primary pumper had gone down. We had to drop the lines off of that very quickly and pull up another pumping apparatus from the staging area and hook the hoses up as quick as we could. So it's definitely one that could happen. So we're going to be talking about level 1 staging a bit. Level 1 staging is automatically in effect for all incidents. All right, fire officers will know this, right? Anytime we're at an incident, apparatus are showing up, there's going to be level 1 staging. So we're not going to spend, we'll spend a little bit of time. Is my internet connection working okay? All right.
A little bit chopped there.
All right, so level 1 staging occurs during the initial stages of an incident. Each arriving apparatus is going to select an appropriate position for staging, and you're going to be fairly close to the incident scene. We want to avoid cluttering the scene or boxing in the scene unless we're notified by incident command that we need to be in a different location. And there's, so it's really important that our drivers, are aware of this. They're paying attention to this. They're not looking to, if there's other vehicles around, we're not boxing them in. We're obviously not driving over our own equipment or making, pinch points and things that will make it more difficult for us to either access the scene, get around the vehicles or that, right? So our uncommitted apparatus are going to stage at a position basically somewhere close by and provide maximum tactical and the closer it is to the scene, obviously the more useful it's going to be to us, but that does come with some caveats. We certainly don't want to be having it too close. But by having these apparatus at the scene, we're able to have enhanced tactical operations because the apparatus are right there. We have our water supply right there and available. So you can see the benefits of having our apparatus closer. I often have to show up at a fire scene. I'm often parking very far away, and as soon as I have the opportunity, I'm trying to get up a little closer because all of my resources, all of my paperwork, everything I'm going to need for fire investigations or fire watch reports, all of that is going to be in my truck, and I like to have it nice and close by, and I know we all do. So at this level, at the level 1 staging, we have no staging officer, right? There is no one there telling you where to go. As we're reporting, as we're coming in, we'll be, reporting our status. We're going to try and find the appropriate positioning, but it doesn't hurt to give a call if there is an apparatus on scene already. Give a call, ask the incident commander where they would like you to stage. It's typically just a really good practice to get into, especially if you're arriving a little late to the party. And that happens often with mutual aid. So if you're coming in on a mutual aid call, asking the incident commander, exactly where do you want us? They'll tell you where to be. So with level 1 staging, we certainly need to have a certain amount of caution. As you can see from the slide here, bad things can happen to fire trucks. I'm sure we've all seen things like this happened before. So remember, fire department vehicles should never park in areas underneath utility lines or any other objects really that could fall on that vehicle. They should never park in an area where radiant heat could cause damage to the vehicle. So we don't want to be parking too close to the, if we're at a structure fire, certainly don't want to be parking too close to that. And often you don't know you're too close until it's too late. We want to park in an area. We never want to park in an area with soft ground or a septic tank where that might be located, for obvious reasons. It would, you know, if we all of a sudden get a sinkhole there, the ground may not be as firm and able to support the weight of a fully loaded fire apparatus. It's much more likely we're going to go through. So try to be aware of those kind of things when we're arriving at scene. Just a couple of things to keep in mind. So with level 1 staging, we want to basically, we'll talk about apparatus placement right now. So first, engine on scene is going to announce on scene. So they're going to make the radio broadcast to dispatch, you know, engine 1 on scene. They're going to be doing a size up report, right? This should be all review for you. We're going to try and find the best tactical position for that apparatus we're in, and you're going to start operations, right? So again, the placement and selecting the correct place for your first arriving apparatus is actually going to set you up for either success or failure as we move on. The first arriving apparatus should, you know, assume the best tactical position for the incident that they can and start to initiate those operations. So the first tender arriving on scene. Same idea. We're going to announce on scene, we're going to locate near the engine, and we're going to deploy the drop tank, right? So basically, we're going to look at, you know, trying to locate that drop tank as close as we can to the engine that's going to be pumping the water to us, and get that deployed right away. So all other units that are coming in, it says here stage 1 block. You know, it doesn't have to be a full city block, but you're not necessarily going to be quite as close to the scene as the engine would have to be, or as your first tender would have to be as they come in. We need to have room for the tenders as they're coming in, so that they can drop their water loads as they arrive, and they can turn around and go back for another load of water. So with all other units, again, announcing location, they're going to be uncommitted. We want to park in the direction of travel, and of course await assignment. So again, no freelancing in these situations. We don't want to be parking in front of any kind of fire hydrants or other fire department connections, other water sources, a drafting hydrant. We don't want to be blocking streets or roadways with the other apparatus if we can avoid it. It's sometimes a bit unavoidable depending on it, on the scene. If you're parking on a roadway, we will want to have traffic control as well set up to make sure we don't have residents coming through, driving over our lines. We also need to make them aware that, you know, a lane is partially or completely blocked on their way up. Always going to be parking outside of a collapse zone. And so we have to be aware, you know, depending on the size of the building we're going to, we need to be at least 1.5 times the building height away from that building to make sure that our apparatus is safe. And as we said before, be aware of those overhead power lines when you are parking. All right, so there's our uncommitted resources out there. All right, so this has a little bit of a detail on a little bit of an example on of a situation where we might have apparatus showing up to a scene. So we've engine 1 has shown up on scene. Tender 1, let's see here. They don't seem to be working very well. Engine 1 and tender 1, you can see we've put right close to where that fire is. Tender 2, we've asked to stage out at the corner. We do not need tender 2 right close by right away. Perhaps we have mutual aid coming on. We'll call them engine 2 and engine 3, or in tender 3. We will we'll ask them to as well stage at the roadway. That gives them the maximum possible options in terms of where they would, you know, where they can go based on what the needs of the scene are. Perhaps they need to go left, right, up one of those intersections, depending on where the water source is. So this is a good way of really thinking about, you know, our first arriving apparatus. Where are we going to want them? So with level 1 staging, one thing that's very common for us is we come into long driveways, right? This is, some of our areas have more of these. I know Silver Creek, we have some incredibly long driveways. Falkland, I've been to a couple that have them. Ranchero, certainly. And a lot of our areas, you're going to find these, right? So again, with these, we're going to want to, announce that we're on scene. With the apparatus that are going to be actually used to fight the fire. So the engine, first arriving engine, is going to have to make an approach up the driveway if they can. So that's an option. If they can't, you may need to park on the roadway, depending on the conditions. In the winter, you're going to have icy conditions. It's going to be very difficult to get up there. And remember, only unless otherwise directed by the incident commander, if you come to a scene and there is a large driveway, only the attack engine should enter that driveway to access the scene to start. All right, unless the incident commander gives you other directions. The attack engine should then, lay a supply. If you've got a hydrant, you can lay a supply line from the nearest hydrant on the roadway up to your apparatus that's going to be up the driveway at level 1 staging. If not, you may end up having to keep in mind that you're going to need room for the tender up there as well, and start seeing, can the tender turn around? Are we going to be able to do shuttle operations in this location? So that first engine on scene, they're going to provide with a size up report, and they're going to start operations. Now, if we got a size up report for the photo we have on the scene here, I've got a fully engulfed, looks like type 5 structure. With some, looks like we've definitely got some exposures there that we need to be concerned about. So we give that size up report, we start pulling lines, we start getting water onto the fire. So all other units that are coming, again, we're going to announce that we're on scene, and then we're going to stage on the road. Deploy the dump tank, and that dump tank, again, possibly the closer you can get to the apparatus, to the engine that's actually moving the water, the better. And that may mean actually having to go up the long driveway to do that. If not, the engine may have to come down the driveway, and the attack lines would just have to be extended, which leads to a lot more friction loss. So if we can avoid it, we try to avoid those long hose lays. As much as we can, we try to have the shorter hose lays, less friction loss, more actual water making it up onto the fire. So with the ICS model, the incident commander may have a support staff or team member that helps with staging at this point. When we have a long driveway, you may want to think about having a staging officer in these situations. So because all of our resources should be staging on the road and prepare to supply water to any apparatus that's committed to the scene. Wildland urban interface is a little bit different, right? It's one of the most dangerous in regards to our life safety, and that's due to the complexity and the scope of these types of fires. Grass fires can move very quickly, much quicker than expected, and any apparatus, it might not be on a paved road, might not have the same kind of traction, and it can be easily overtaken. So we need to keep that in mind, try to have a good idea on wind directions, what the expectations of that fire is, and do not put yourself in the path of an oncoming wildfire. Again, with these, we're looking at, announcing that we're on scene, doing size up report, finding the best tactical positions we can for the job we've been assigned, and initiating operations. So these incidents will be the ones that we experience often a need to escalate from a level 1 to a level 2 staging with a formal staging officer, and that's due to the sheer number of resources that are required to fight a wildland urban interface fire. If anybody on this call has ever been to a provincial deployment before, you'll be well aware of this. They have huge staging areas where they're going to have all the apparatus, any equipment, extra pumps, extra personnel, everything you need, any resources that might be required, you can find them at these staging areas. So yeah, again, very big, a lot of resources required to battle it. Level 2 staging should certainly be a consideration. So other considerations that we need to be looking at is the weather. We want to be uphill and upwind if possible. We want to be aware of any hazards that could include power lines, fallen trees, vehicles, people, animals on the roadway, anything. And then smoke, of course, is a hazard. We want to avoid driving our vehicles into smoke or staging inside of smoke. That, it's bad for our respiratory system. We're going to be breathing that stuff in for who knows how long, really, right? It depends on how long our resources are required to be there. So some other considerations, we want to find a hard surface for staging. And we want to find it should be in a safe location, preferably upwind. So we don't want to be downwind. We don't want to have the smoke coming at us. If we can have it being pushed away, that's ideal. But often these as well, you have to remember, the larger when wildfires get large, they end up creating their own weather systems. And the wind direction can change at a moment's notice. You don't see it coming. All of a sudden, the wind changes direction from blowing south to blowing north, and you're directly in the path. If that was to happen, consider finding an alternate place to stage. We want to make sure we park our vehicles facing in the direction of escape. So if we have a way that we know, we have to identify what are our escape routes. And once we've identified that escape route, we need to have our apparatus pointed in the right direction. The last thing you need is if the wildfire is bearing down on you and something changes and starts changing the reality of the scene that you're on and putting you in danger. The last thing you want to be doing is the Austin Powers 3-point turn, or a multi-point turn, trying to get that apparatus turned around so that you can get out of there. Make sure it's ready to go in the direction you want it to be. And we want to stay on roadways whenever possible, right? So this isn't always possible depending on the situation, but we don't want to drive off before figuring out, whether the ground even has the ability to hold the apparatus. Leaving roadways should be a last resort type of option. We want to stay on those roadways. They're designed to hold vehicles, and we don't know what we're driving over as soon as we get off of that roadway. So there are some access challenges with Wildland Urban Interface. The response time can be very long because depending on where it's located. It could be out in the backcountry somewhere and take a while to get to. We're often dealing with narrow roads, could be even forestry roads and things like that we're dealing with and trying and having to drive a very large piece of equipment down. It can be very difficult and complex access, depending. You might have different properties with gates and things in the way that you need to get past, and maneuvering can be very difficult to get around in those situations. So again, we want to always position the engine like for the ease of our operations and our ability to escape. Okay, so that's something to always keep in mind. The response times may be longer for these types of calls because of the access difficulties. Roads may be too narrow to allow for the evacuation of residents and for the access of the firefighters at the same time. So if there are evacuation procedures being undertaken, and you've got either the RCMP or other firefighters going around getting residents out of the area, you may find yourself battling traffic. And the slide there is kind of a little bit of a depiction that you can see where, there's a guy packed up his stuff, trying to get out, fire department's trying to get the other way. And it can lead to a bit of a problem if we had to back all the way down a long forestry road. As we're driving, also something that would be important is paying attention to any landmarks and hazards on the way in. And those can be used in the case that we need to beat a hasty retreat out of the area. Look for safety zones, areas that we might be able to find safety in that dangerous environment. Complex routes, we might want to even consider using flagging tape. All right, so if it ends up being something where there's multiple forks in the road and a very difficult access to find, marking that direction with flagging tape is an option and something you might want to consider. We want to back in from the last known turnaround and use a spotter whenever we can. Again, we want to be pointed out if we can. So if if you're able to, once you figure out where you're going to be staging, find that last turnaround point that you have and try to back it up so that you're ready to, so that you're pointed in the right way for your escape. Using a drive-by approach whenever possible helps. So basically, we want to have lots of room for a turnaround. So we want to be able to maybe we have to drive by, find another way around, and come back. And that helps us do a bit of a size up as we're doing it as well. And always keep your headlights and your emergency lights on as well while you're out on these wildland fires and at any fire. We want to make sure our emergency lights are always on, alert the public. So some other things we need to take into consideration. So traffic, often much less on a wildland urban interface call, but still something to be aware of, especially if we've got residents that are being evacuated. So the proximity, we want to be close enough that we can, that we don't have to, hike for a couple of kilometers to get to our apparatus, but we don't want to be so close that our apparatus becomes in danger. And again, some of the other, basically, we don't want to be parking anywhere where we might have site hazards. So getting back to the traffic, we don't want to block other traffic if we can avoid it, because we may also have other fire apparatus coming up. Remember that they need access there. We may have residents trying to get out. We want to, same idea, if there's any structures that we're near, we want to be aware of the collapse zone. We don't want to be parking over flammable vegetation if we can avoid it. Basically, if you're parked on unburnt vegetation, that is fuel. That is something that can now ignite and put you in a very dangerous situation. If we park in the black, which is the part that's already been burnt, there's much less chance of us actually, of that rekindling and putting you in a dangerous spot. The black is actually one of the safest places you can be. Again, being aware that it was just on fire, you're going to want to make sure that it's cool enough to drive on before you get down that way. Always leaving your engine running is also important with your emergency lights on. That allows us to make that quick retreat, right? Just like if you're driving a getaway car for that bank route or that bank heist you guys are planning, make sure you leave that engine running so you're ready to go. Another good thing to keep in mind with, at any kind of fire, but certainly at wildland urban interface fires, would be to close the doors and windows to your apparatus, and keep the hose bed covered if you can, and any of your compartments closed, right? We don't want ashes and cinders and, getting in there. We leave the windows open. An ember could get up, could enter your vehicle and end up actually lighting the entire thing on fire. So, it's even better if we could leave somebody with the vehicle so the vehicle is not unattended in the event that something like that were to happen. Again, remember, wildland fires are dynamic and fast spreading. Safety first attitude, that's how we basically do all our business. Maintain your situational awareness. So again, the fast spreading character of wildland fire, it can compromise the safe and effective deployment of suppression resources, right? So the first responsibility that we have is to prevent injury to ourselves. We have to approach every fire, every one of these situations with that safety first attitude. No fire suppression tasks are considered sufficiently urgent to justify any of the risk taking or shortcuts, certainly not freelancing. So we'll talk a little bit as well about motor vehicle incidents, because we do respond in the CSRD to motor vehicle incidents. While we don't do auto extrication, we will be there for scene safety, and understanding, apparatus positioning is important as well. MVIs are where we're going to spend, is one of the, these are some of the highest risk calls we're going to go to, especially if you're going to an MVI on the Trans-Canada Highway. Very high risk. And I can tell you, I personally have been in a situation where I had an apparatus that was crashed into at an MVA call at a previous department. And it is not something you ever want to be a part of. We were very fortunate that nobody was injured in that situation, but the truck was damaged very badly, and it could have been much worse. The semi ended up going sideways on the roadway. We saw him for about 400 meters. He didn't slow down, ended up starting to do the shimmy, ends up sideways, hit off of ambulance that was loading that was about to load a patient into the back. They ended up scrambling into the woods and were safe. It then careened across the highway, struck my rescue unit, and I had 2 firefighters behind there at the time, and fortunately they had put their chocks in place, or it could have been thrown back into them and seriously injured or even killed them. This vehicle then went down a 30-foot embankment. So, you know, and I've had a number of times where it was much more way closer than I want it to be. You can't guarantee that people are paying attention out there. So these are very high risk. When we're on the highways, we need to be at very heightened alert levels at all times. There's no, head down. You need to have that situational awareness. What's going on? Because traffic is the greatest threat that we have on these kind of calls. So we're gonna move on here. We'll start with a nice little picture of an apparatus that got struck. It looks like an ambulance got hit from a semi. It's kind of bringing back some flashback memories. Not exactly that's not my call, but yeah, very similar. So like I said, the greatest threat to your safety is oncoming vehicles. So as we're approaching the scene for an MVI, we want to give, if we're the first responding apparatus getting out there, we want to report the conditions. We want to give the other responding apparatus an idea of what they're coming to. Are the roads icy? Are they slick? Is it, if they're in good shape, it's not necessarily something you have to broadcast. But if there's anything, if it's slick from rain or snow or ice, we certainly want to be passing that along, and especially if we notice any specific areas that are worse than others. All right. And with every scene, we're going to be doing a scene size up. All right. So transmit that report. You might even want them to consider, if it's bad enough, the apparatus behind you, you can always advise them to take an alternate route. Maybe, change the way that change where the direction of travel they're going. If there's road blockages, definitely let them know those kind of things as well. And so when we near the scene, we want to slow down and we want to position that first vehicle to protect the scene and the emergency personnel. And the way we do that is using what's called the Fend Off Position often. And the Fend Off Position is when we park our apparatus at an angle. And here we have a bit of an example of that. If you look past the engine, right up close to us here to the engine behind, that apparatus is parked in a fend off position. It's parked on an angle. If a high-speed vehicle were to hit it, the kinetic forces from that vehicle would actually cause it to glance off. It's going to do some serious damage, but it shouldn't force that vehicle to now come towards the emergency personnel operating on that scene, right? So that's where the protection comes in. We use our apparatus to protect our personnel. All right. I would, and I think any one of our chiefs here, any one of us would say the same thing, that, we can replace apparatus. We can replace, it doesn't matter if it's, $500,000 or what it costs. We can't replace a life. So using the apparatus to fend off is absolutely something we expect to see. We want to be able to, in good position for deployment of any resources we need. If it's, hose lines we need to deploy, we want to be close enough for that. If it's the traffic control, then again, make sure that our apparatus that has our traffic control gear is close. Provide us with access to the scene and block access for people who shouldn't be at the scene. And we want to make sure that the direction, basically facing the same direction as the traffic flow. We don't turn our apparatus around on a highway and park it facing traffic ever. All right. We always park it in the same direction as the traffic flow. Okay, so level 1 staging on scene. We want command to be visible. We're going to, we typically will take an incident command role. Our road rescue partners, RCMP, BC ambulance, they don't train on the ICS system the same way we do. And in many of these cases, even though we're only being called out possibly for scene safety, it may end up that your highest ranking officer or officer in the first vehicle is going to assume that incident commander role. And that incident commander needs to be visible because a lot of the other agencies you're working with might not even know to look for you. So at least if you're wearing that nice green vest, says incident commander on it, people are like, oh, what's that all about? I guess that's the guy I need to talk to. It's just a bit of a trigger for our partners out there. We want to limit on-scene activity to essential personnel only. This is going to be, we want to reduce that scene congestion as much as we can and increase the safety of our responders. I worked with a guy before, we showed up and there was a call. Lake Louise had one of the worst MVIs I've ever been to. 5 semis crashed into each other. And there was one survivor, and this survivor was on the top of the pile hanging upside down from a seatbelt, and he happened to be about 300 pounds. Lake Louise Fire Department was working on the extrication, and we were looking, and our job was to help look for anyone else. But one of my firefighters decided he was going to go and climb around up top and try to get in on the extrication. That person was disciplined pretty severely for that. We do not freelance 100%, and that extra congestion he was causing could have increased the amount of time it took to get that patient out. So if you're not told to be up close to whatever the situation is, don't be there. And that comes in play as well for fatalities, especially with fatalities. We don't need to see that. If we don't, if our services aren't needed at that specific spot, why do we want to bring ourselves close up there? It's hard enough being at those kind of calls without having to be confronted with the reality of what it is. So again, we want to establish emergency scene traffic control according to our operating guidelines, right? So it says here, stage off the road. So if you're not being used for fend off, having your vehicles parked over on the shoulder is a great idea if possible, right? So see if we can do a little bit of an exercise here. Now, again, this was designed originally for an in-class presentation, but we can ask right now, like, what do you see that's wrong with this vehicle? And I'll take a couple of minutes, and if anybody can point out something, bonus points for you.
It's parked in front of the hydrant.
Great, parked in front of the hydrant, absolutely. That is a bad move.
Parked under the power lines.
Power lines, excellent, good job. Yeah, no, really good job.
And shouldn't be this guy in the blue and green shorts just wandering out there.
Yeah,
no
scene control, right? We've got no scene control happening, right? That's exactly right. We've got somebody just wandering around. What's this guy doing there, right?
The apparatus is a little close to the fire.
Yes. Absolutely. That apparatus placement is actually something that's very concerning in a lot of ways, right? The engine still allows the vehicles to pass by. In a situation like this, it's not a bad idea to temporarily close the road. All right. And there's nothing wrong with shutting down the road. I can tell you from lessons learned, I wouldn't hesitate to shut down a roadway if I thought that it would improve the safety of our responders on a call. We don't officially, as a fire department, have authority to do that, but I've never found a police officer that's willing to charge an incident commander for shutting down a highway. And if they ever do, you just say, I'm not shutting it down. I'm redirecting traffic. All right. I'm redirecting it back that way, but I'm redirecting traffic. All right. That's,
Sean, with that engine parked that way, you'd have to run the lines across the highway anyway, so you'd have to shut it down.
So a situation like that, exactly, you'd have to you'd have to shut it down if you're looking at that being the apparatus that's going to be fighting the fire. Excellent point. So yeah, you need to shut the hydrant down on that one.
Not seeing
well, good
any
job.
signs.
I think you guys found most of the issues there. That's great. So incident traffic management, I mean, this isn't a traffic course, so I'm going to try and get through some of this a little bit. I might go through this fairly quickly. For those of you who've taken, the traffic, emergency scene traffic control, some of this might end up being a bit of a repeat for you. But for initial arriving responders, the natural tendency for us is to immediately commit all of our resources to mitigating whatever hazards we have, providing emergency care and doing our job. And few of and sometimes we forget that we need to protect that scene. All right. We need to, and this can end up being that fatal error. this is some of the most dangerous stuff. I'm going to say it over and over again. I want you guys to really to understand that, you know, if you haven't experienced a situation where you've been there when a semi crashes through your lines, trust me, you don't want to. It is not, you know, it's a very, very, very scary situation. And I really did think I was going to be making phone calls to family members that night. So we got very lucky. Protecting the scene though, and ensuring the safety of you know, not only us but the victims, any bystanders, and other emergency personnel that's there. This is part of that incident stabilization process and needs to be considered a top priority. And again, we stage that large apparatus in the fend off position, right? So going on to fend off position there, you can see how those vehicles are, right? So again, we've got our traffic control zones here. And each one of these zones is very important. And again, it goes much more detail into this when you do your emergency scene traffic course. But you can see if there was a situation where maybe there was a vehicle that was traveling down the roadway and was able to, I mean, wasn't paying attention for whatever reason, or had their own mechanical issue, they could end up going through those cones very easily. If they hit your apparatus here, very likely it's going to bounce off and glaze off. The apparatus, the fire truck is going to end up maybe getting hit over towards the ditch, which again, if there's anybody operating on the far side of that, there is a chance that they could be injured. But much less so than if you have it parked head on and they ram into the back. Much more likely that that apparatus is now going to move forward and become a projectile towards our responders. So again, establishing these traffic control zones is going to help us provide, you know, long-range visibility for motorists to see us before they get there, provide them with a bit of a warning. It's going to give them some obvious options as to how to get around us. And we also want to provide them with enough decision-making time for those motorists to do what they need to do. All right, so that's going to make sure that we have a well-managed traffic flow. It's going to definitely significantly reduce the risk of exposure for all emergency personnel and citizens on the scene. So a couple of areas here, we'll just kind of show you those. So you saw the last slide, and warning signs. So we've got the signs. It's going to say, you know, fire, emergency scene ahead, fire department. You should all have these. Make sure that they're put in a good spot. You don't want to be putting them around a blind corner. You want to be making sure you have enough leeway for them to see and to be able to react to those signs, but not so much that they forget about it and say, oh, I guess that sign didn't mean anything, right? We've got the transition area, again, provides with some direction. If you know, having just a straight line across is very hard for our vision to see and make out what exactly they want us to do. By positioning the cones in this kind of transition, in this way in a transition area, it's very clear for the motorists exactly which direction we expect them to go there. And then it allows us to protect that activity area as we go. You can see the buffer space here. Again, that's just a little bit of added safety. It says police parking. I don't know that I would necessarily say that, because again, I like the police to park with, you know, on the other side of my apparatus as well. Let's protect them. We're there to protect them as well. I'm not looking to put them out now and, hey, you guys are going to be the ones that are in the line of fire. We're there. We've got the biggest trucks that you know, of the responders that would be coming to these scenes. Let's use them to help protect everybody on the scene and let the police stage somewhere on the other side. All right. So the activity area, again, this is where everything's going to be happening. It's where the work gets done. All right. So we've going to have space, basically the space where the incident is, you know, actually occurred. It'll provide for a work area for responders, and we want to, you know, be able to get in there and get out of there. The good thing I might say though about having the police on the outside of the zone, if depending on the roadway you're on, but you know, having them a little further back, is the motorists coming up are going to see the blue flashing lights as they come, and they tend to react a heck of a lot better to slowing down when they see blue flashing lights than they do just red flashing lights. At least that's my experience. But again, if you can position them in such a way that they are still protected but their lights are visible, that's ideal. So again, the termination area, basically this is the end of our traffic control. It lets motorists know that, the incident is over. They can go back to their normal speed. It could end up being a staging area in that termination area as well, a place where we could hold other apparatus. Much less chance you're going to get a car coming from the other direction. They do have, in this picture, you see that purple car there. Looks like it's parked in a fend off. I believe that's actually part of the incident. The only place you really need to park in the fend off is from the motorist coming up from the same direction that the accident is. All right. So I thought I'd add some comedy to this as well. Basically, whenever possible, the transfer responsibility of traffic control to the RCMP or a certified traffic control agency. Now, the RCMP thing makes me laugh pretty hard because I've never, ever seen that happen. 15 years, never seen it happen. Yes, on paper, they are the ones responsible for traffic management. But you try to get a police officer to do traffic control at an emergency scene. If you do, I got a bottle of scotch for you. All right, that's the next challenge. And send me a picture. It didn't happen. The certified traffic control agency is far more likely, and that's typically going to be a call to the, using to dispatch, telling them we're going to need traffic control, call the highway contractor and get them out. Again, depending on where you are, it may end up taking a long time for that traffic control agency. And remember, the clock is ticking, right? With your emergency scene traffic control, it basically gives you the authority to do emergency scene traffic for up to 2 hours, they say. It's not to say if 2 hours passes, you guys turn into pumpkins and should leave the scene. We definitely don't want to be leaving an uncontrolled scene. But we want to keep that in mind so that we can get those traffic control specialists out there as soon as possible.
Hey,
All right.
Sean,
Well, I said I'd be short on level 1 staging. I was wrong, but we're going on to level 2 staging now. And this is really kind of the meat of this workshop that we put on here. So level 2 staging is a more formalized establishment of a marshalling area that's utilized when command needs to maintain a reserve of resources on scene. So we need to have those resources ready to go. So we're going to we're going to set up a level 2 staging at that part. What this does is it's going to place all the reserve resources in a central location and automatically, and if we do a level 2 staging, if we decide to implement that, we are going to need to have a staging officer, somebody overseeing the staging area. Some good things about it: it prevents the premature deployment of resources, it prevents freelancing, provides for responder safety and personnel accountability. And we really should be considering level 2 staging for all major incidents and even mutual aid responses. I can't tell you how many times we go to scenes and we've got, 3 different engines from 3 different fire departments there, and only one's really being used. Well, those other ones, end up in some ways being in the way. It could be in the way. If they're not, and it's not necessarily, again, I'm not making those decisions for you, but definitely keep these in mind, right? Maybe it's time to set up, if we've got a mutual aid call, it's time to set up that level 2 staging. So, like I said, it's there to maintain a reserve of those on-scene resources, right? We don't need them right now. We may need it. We may need them. We may need them in the future. So, command should consider activating that level 2 staging, like when they're calling for those additional resources, right? Okay, I'm going to need more stuff here. Maybe I need a place for them to report to, so that they're not all showing up at the scene at the same time, and we don't have enough room maybe on scene. So you're asking for those resources. Consider setting up a level 2 staging area. If you set that up, you ask for the resources, you inform dispatch that you've set up a level 2 staging area, and ask that all incoming units report to that staging area and not to the scene. All right. So when activating a level 2 staging, the command will give the approximate location of the staging area, and it should request a separate radio channel for that staging officer. We'll have a tactical channel for our TAC teams working, and it's good to set up a second tactical channel if you can for the staging officer as well. So those responding resources are going to report to the staging location, the level 2 staging. Basically, any resources that are already staged at the level 1 at the call, or any that are en route to level 1 already, can stay there unless the incident command decides that they don't need you and they send you away, right? All other responding units, once that staging is set up, should be proceeding to that level 2 staging area. Passport accountability needs to be maintained while we're out there, all right? And that is the staging officer who is going to be maintaining that. Now, when you arrive at the staging area, level 2, the officer is going to grab the passport with all of the accountability tags for the team that was on the apparatus they're on, and they're going to go to the staging officer and give them the passport. Now, if a unit gets called up, you'll get your passport back, be sent back out be sent out there and give your passport to the incident commander when you report to scene. All right. And then there are login and log out forms, and we'll go through them a little bit as well in a little bit. Right. So again, the staging area should be some distance away from the command post and the emergency scene, and that helps to reduce that congestion. But it should be close enough for that prompt response to the incident site. So all of the responding units, anybody in the staging area, will stay off air, all right? Basically off the air. And you don't have to ask, where do I report to? You go directly to the staging area and report to the staging officer with your accountability tags. We try to keep the crews intact, okay? Keeping our crews intact, make sure that, everybody you came with is still gonna be on the apparatus when you get called up to the scene. So, your personnel are part of the resource of that apparatus. That crew should stay together. When you're assigned to the duties, again, you get your passport off of the staging officer. You communicate on the tactical channel that you're coming, and then you're going to go and you're going to check in with your incident commander and get your assignment for what they want you to be doing. Any personal vehicles, so that's what the POV. Personal vehicles are that report to staging, and they can become part of what's called a call-out unit. So this is one of those situations where having a few extra passports available for the staging officer to keep with them would be very helpful. These personal vehicles, when they arrive to scene, they would, again, bring their accountability tag over to the staging officer. Staging officer can then put these on passports, and if they're, if the incident commander says, listen, I need manpower, I'm gonna need a team of 4 up here, boom, you've got your team of 4, you put them on this passport, give it, put somebody as a team leader, give it to that team leader, and then they'll report to scene. They're gonna have to hoof it in, but that's the way that operates with the personal vehicles. All right, so basically, when we're looking at staging, we want to make sure that we're locating an area that's a big enough size for all the apparatus that we anticipate having at this scene. And that includes any apparatus that may end up responding later. It also includes, if there's going to be extra ambulances, is it going to be hydro, gas, other utilities companies out there? Are we going to need highways? So think, don't just think about fire department and for fire department staging, anybody else coming to the scene. And when we're talking about big scenes, it's going to be a lot of different agencies involved. So find the right area for it. It's good to establish a good layout of the area, of your staging area. So having one entrance maybe, and a separate exit, a very identified area for parking, and keeping specific types of vehicles kind of grouped together. So all your engines in one location, all your tenders in one location, any minis or CAFs or RIVs all in a different location, command vehicles can be somewhere else, police somewhere else. So that just helps keep it all organized and makes it much easier for the staging officer to kind of maintain control of that staging area. We're going to transmit that location once we've decided it, and we're going to want to also coordinate with our other partners like the police. We could ask them in some cases, depending on how big it is, if to try to block the streets, but it may end up being, and more than likely will end up being, our job. As a staging officer, you want to assume a position that's visible as well so that they can see you, right? And the location of the staging should also be a place that's easy to find and accessible to the vehicles that are coming in. One way to do this is leaving red lights on, on the vehicles as they're staged. It doesn't need to be on all the vehicles, but the staging officer's apparatus, if you leave the lights on that one, it should be, something that they'll, in most cases, be going by before they arrive at the incident scene. So again, we're going to want to establish that check-in and check-out procedure as well. We need to maintain accountability. We need to know where people are and where they're going, and using that passport and accountability status board. So the staging officer will maintain a log of the resources in that area and any specialized equipment that they have, any personnel they have. Their job is also to maintain make sure that the crews are in a ready state with their apparatus, right? There's no wandering around and hey, ooh, nice rig, let's go check that out. You should be ready to go, right? If you're in level 2 staging, these are, there's a very good likelihood you're going to be called up. We want to provide those progress reports to command, let them know, the number and type of units that we have at the staging area. And also maybe to determine if there's any further needs. We don't have enough, tenders, or we don't have enough personnel here right now. And then we'll assign them as, we're going to assign those resources only at the direction of the incident commander. So the incident commander will say, it will not be asking for firefighter 305, 314, and 316. They're going to ask for a team of 3. They're not going to be asking for White Lake Engine 1 necessarily. They're going to be asking for an engine, right? A type 1 engine. So just be aware of that and give them what they're asking for. So here's a good example of a photo kind of showing how larger. We're talking about a pretty large event here, likely something like the Kelowna wildfires or the some of the bigger wildfires we've had around the areas recently. You'll find something like this where you're going to have different engines parked in a certain area. They got buses, dozer parking, water tender parking. They're going to have toilets. You see there's one way in, one way out, right? So there's an entry and an exit. This helps keep everything flowing much better, right? And definitely avoids any congestion in the area. So the staging area may contain all or just some of these services, and it's going to depend on the size of the scene and the needs, right? So you may you should have some way of tracking the resources and tracking the personnel to be basically for us to issue equipment and supplies. You may find food services there, sanitation, medical services, firefighter rehab. You might have SCBA cylinder filling there as well, and replacement there. And for hazmat calls, you may end up needing a decontamination area. So I mentioned that we've got some forms, and these forms were all part of your the invitation. I did attach these to the invitation that I sent out for this. So you've got these, and it's a good idea again to keep these on the apparatus. And I'll just kind of go through these fairly quickly here. But so we've got there is also a sheet I gave you with instructions on how to fill these out. So over here we've got the incident name, right? What is the name of the assigned incident, right? And you can, it could be structure fire at 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, Squilax Anglemont. Call it what you want to. Really, that incident name is going to be unique to your department and how you want it to work. So the operational, so all we're talking about here is enter the time interval, right? When did it start? When did we start this operational period? If we start getting into longer period, a bigger wildland urban interface where we have actually tagging out and the staging officer gets replaced, now we're going to have, when a start finish time would want to be in there as well. So where is the check-in location? Basically, are they going to be checking in at the command post? Are they checking in at the staging area? Or is there another area they're going to need to check in? So here we talk about the equipment description. Are we talking about, so type? Are we talking about an engine, a tender, a CAFS unit? Assign name or call sign, if there is a call sign. In this case, again, you could put it's what equipment description, it's an engine. ID name, could be engine 1, or if we're using the new system, it might be Foxtrot 141. So, or I guess it'd be 121. Next, we have the agency. So mutual aid calls, any kind of, you know, these bigger calls where we're looking at level 2 staging, it's likely you're going to have more than one fire department. It's not just going to be the Eagle Bay Fire Department or the Malakwa Fire Department. It's going to be, you know, there's going to be other mutual aid departments on scene as well. So identifying where that comes from, that apparatus comes from, is important. How many personnel came with the apparatus? Pretty straightforward. What is their work assignment? Do they have one? Unassigned is one of the options, of course. Who's the contact information, right? So who's the operator? Often it'll be the operator. So who was driving the truck when they came in? That's the person you need to be able to know how to get in touch with. Perhaps, you know, if you have a cell phone number in the larger areas, if it's a smaller level 2 staging area, should be able to go, hey, John, need you now. But larger ones, you might need a phone number, or if they have a call sign and you're using radios, take that call sign down. So basically mark if this was the first time that they've checked in, right? If this is them returning to level 2 staging, you don't have to mark that box the next time. And then we have the check-in and check-out time, and we use the 24-hour clock, right? None of this AM, PM, it's going to be in the 24-hour clock. So here we've got who prepared it, name, title, date and time, 24-hour clock. So that's for, you know, who made this sheet. Typically that's the staging officer. And the date and time that the form was submitted. So again, that's just not always gonna, on smaller scenes, we may not even end up putting that in, but it's a good time to say, when did we wrap everything up? So as I mentioned, don't forget level 2 staging, you may end up, it's not only going to be fire, right? We have RCMP, there's the Ministry of Transportation, BC Ambulance Service. You can see this is older because it has JPW, that's AIM now, the highways contractor. Ministry of the Environment or BC Forestry Service is another option. And don't forget the media. The media may show up. I see that in red at the bottom with a lot of exclamation points. Ken really liked the media, and he definitely was the first one to make this up. So personally, I'm okay if you guys want to stage the media somewhere far away from the scene. All right, so here we've got basically, it's a very similar type looking form, but this is for personnel, right? One is for equipment, one is for personnel. And personnel have to check in if they show up, you know, with as well. When they show up, they have to check in as well. So the incident commander can choose to pre-identify the number of types and resources that from the state that he needs from the staging officer. So for example, maybe an incident commander might call up the staging officer and be like, listen, I need you to maintain 3 engines, 3 rescues, and 2 CAS units there. As soon as you dip below that number, we're going to call and get more resources there. I need you to find a way. I need you to let me know so that we can request more resources. All right. So having those bare minimum numbers, especially on bigger calls, is very important. If the incident commander doesn't establish the types and number of apparatus that they want in the staging area, then the staging officer is responsible for notifying the incident commander every time that additional units are required. So if you start getting low, if you're the staging officer, you're put in that role and you start getting low and you realize that it's like, well, I only got 1 engine left here. It's a good idea to let the incident commander know that, right? And again, the incident commander can then call and ask for more resources in that case. So water supply, basically a water supply officer might end up being assigned as well in level 1 staging. And if you do have a water supply officer, that may become a good indicator for you that we might be having a pretty large call here and may want to start considering setting up that level 2 staging area. All right, so it's important to know that the staging officer does not determine the need to assign a water supply officer. It's the incident commander has it at their full discretion. And a water supply officer is somebody, again, who's going to oversee the water supply, which is the tender operations, the pumping apparatus. If you've got multiple pumping apparatus, you know, how many supply lines are coming off of them? How are they able to are they able to keep up with the tender shuttle runs that are happening? I've been in this water supply officer role, and actually one time when I was in this role, that's when we had our primary attack pumper just stopped working. It stopped pumping water. People started looking around. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Hey, Sean, do you have a little O-ring, you know, like a 3-inch O-ring? It's like, drop the lines. Don't talk about it anymore. We're not looking to make repairs while we're fighting a fire, because I've got people on the end of those attack lines that now have nothing to protect themselves. So we need to do, when something like that happens, having a water supply officer kind of allows that, you know, allows you to know that this stuff's being taken care of. You know, water goes down, it's like we immediately call up another engine, drop the lines off the first one, get the second one in there, hook the lines up, start pumping water right away as soon as you can, right? So the staging officer might be a good idea in some to think about having multiple radios, right? There's different channels you might need access to, right? Be able to communicate with command on an assigned tactical channel, able to monitor the incoming resources as they're arriving, right? And be able to communicate directly with dispatch might be required. The dispatch one may or may not be required. Incident command may want to take care of all the resource requests, but if they put it to you as a staging officer, you're the one who's going to be making those calls to dispatch to ask for more resources. Important to remember, you know, with the simplex channels, they do have their limitations, right? Their line of sight, and well, obviously a little more, like they go farther than line of sight, but they can be interrupted by, you know, by large buildings, by, you know, geography, land features, and distance, of course. So know the limitations of your radios, and if you're in a dead zone, you may end up having to use other means of communication, whether it's using the dispatch channel or using mobile, you know, using the mobile radios out of the trucks often have a longer range than you will on your portables. Whoa, am I done? I am done. So again, thank you guys very much. This was kind of a bit of a quick and dirty talk about staging, but staging is something that is very important, you know, and I've been to a number of scenes where we've had, you know, apparatus all over the place, and having a level 2 staging established early might have been a good idea. And I've seen situations where we have had that level 2 staging and it has been a great idea. It's worked out really slick. Remember, you know, although I'm responding to a lot of these major calls, I'm not going to be getting there until far later in the call. So as incident commanders, as officers, as firefighters coming up through the ranks, these are things that we should be keeping in mind, right? This is an option for us. Setting up a separate staging area shouldn't be a last resort. It should be part of our playbook, something in our, you know, in our wheelhouse that we're thinking about, do I need this? And something to train on as well, and something to practice a little bit is, you know, look at those forms, understanding, you know, like how we can make this work, you know, with these different levels of staging, and do a little bit of role playing at a practice night when we're finally through this plague and able to meet up again. But if you have an effective staging, effective management of your resources at a scene is just one more step in making sure we have a positive outcome for that emergency scene. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I will pause the recording now, and if there are any questions, I will take them now.